This whole journey here, thinking about thinking, began with a mission that was given to me by now Major General Jeffrey Holmes, who just retired and did his change of command ceremony. He was the Adjutant General of Tennessee. And he was my commander on my first deployment to Iraq. He was Colonel Holmes then, Lieutenant Colonel Holmes. He was dissatisfied with the Army briefings and the training we had concerning Iraqi culture. And he goes, hey, you teach at Middle Tennessee State. Will you put together something that goes in a little more in depth? And in my graduate studies, I'd experienced a class about European culture and thought. And that really kind of pulled it all together. And what I came up with was, at the beginning of this, was we do think differently from, we, collectively, the West, the Anglosphere and Western Europe, think differently from the rest of the world. And if you're wondering why we have such difficulty exporting our ideas, it's because we think differently. They can't just read a book. And this has absolutely nothing to do with intelligence. It has to do like swinging a golf club or swinging a bat. I can only use sports metaphors, and we'll get into that. But the way I first based it was, we have industrial thinking. We went through a scientific revolution that led to an industrial revolution, and 1 and 2, and now we're in a technological revolution. And all this is shaped by our thinking. Where does this thinking come from? Now, the short answer is it comes from the Bible. And we'll go into some exercises that'll teach that. But there's a longer history behind it. It took the West centuries. Let's go back to the first early church, the first 6 centuries of the church. And they're arguing about the nature and the personality and the person of Jesus and the Trinity. And you get all the heresies. You get the Nestorianism, the monophysitism, you can tell I'm a historian and I geek out on this stuff. The Arianism, Apollinarianism, Ebionism. And so, not to mention Gnosticism. But let's not leave that one out. But that was the battlefield of the mind. And they had to come up with new terms. And I was watching a good video the other day on new terms. She was talking about, she was an archaeologist, and she thinks that Sennacherib built the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. She was making her argument. And there were words in his texts that we had not translated yet. And to give you the short end of this story, they used a palm tree to elevate the water up to the higher levels in the Hanging Gardens. And she goes, it wasn't a palm tree. Let's go look at a date palm. She says, if you notice, it has a corkscrew shape. He was using an Archimedes screw before Archimedes screws were popular. And so, but what do you call, what's another name for a screw? I learned this on the Big Bang Theory. It's an axle with an inclined plane wrapped helixly around it. So sometimes we have to invent new words. And so today we're going to talk about thinking and how Scripture actually renews your mind. That's the exciting part. There's a biblical thing. The United States Army, specifically the Department of Defense generally, I was pleased to learn as I go through successive courses as you make rank, teaches this as well. They just don't do it biblically. So I've got 2 sources I'm working from. I've got a scriptural source, and I've got what I've learned in the military about thinking. That's my term. And so, The Bible tells us don't copy the behavior and customs of this world, but let God transform you into a new person by changing the way you think. And some translations say the renewing of the mind. And this is absolutely true. And today I want to demonstrate through some of the practical exercises of how that is true. Just give you a little taste of what the Bible can do. And I hope you'll see the dangers of what things like critical race theory and diversity, equity, and inclusion drag us away from that and what a danger that is. And so if we're going to be Christians in the workplace, we need to speak truth to power. So more on that later. Now, I started developing this in Kenya, going back about 6 years ago. This is not my first real presentation on this, and I think gets better each time. I know there's at least 3 people in there who have heard a variation of this as I grow it. So in Kenya, I learned to ask, how do you kick a soccer ball? Any takers? Anybody want to guess how you kick a soccer ball?
I believe it's with the side of the foot, not the toe.
Right. You kick with the inside of the foot and not the toe. Every Kenyan, just about 90% of them, know this. And so I asked, okay, usually a lot of answers I get is just the foot. And I go, yeah, but what part of the foot? And they go, the inside of the foot. And I go, well, why not the toe? Can't you kick it harder and further with the toe? And they go, yeah, but you can't control where it's going. Now, for some of you that are young boomers and early Gen Xers, you might remember that controversy in the NFL in the 70s with the soccer-style kickers coming in and barefoot kicking and all that. Now, for the longest time, the records for kicking the longest field goals were held by people who kicked with the toe. Actually, it was a guy who didn't have toes. He had a sledgehammer for a foot because he had his toes amputated off. Dempsey. Yes, Tom Dempsey. And so he played for the New Orleans Saints, and he did it at sea level in Tulane Stadium where the air is thick and dense. Not at where it was broken, Mile High Stadium where the air is thin with a breeze behind it. But all that aside, the NFL chose accuracy over strength and distance. And the soccer style kicker won. Thinking is very much like that. And how you effectively think is just as important as how you effectively kick a ball. You want to be successful. You want to get it in the goal. So I hope this plays. And I don't know if I have to hit play. What button do I hit this one?
Michael Rubin, founder and CEO of GSI Commerce, is undercover in his own company. He's posing as a seasonal worker during the busiest time of year. His journey continues in Kentucky.
I'm back at the Ridgewood Fulfillment Center to work as a single-line packer. The employees here are evaluated on how quickly they can pack and ship. The faster they go, the more profits come in. During peak season, we have 6 times the amount of orders to be fulfilled. I want to find out if there's a way to increase production.
I'm Greg Rogers, the pack supervisor.
How are you?
I'm going to take you upstairs to the packing area and hook you up with a trainer and get you going.
Great. I'm a quick learner.
Oh, let's hope so. It's pretty fast paced, actually. The area we're going to put you in is 90 units an hour. Hey, Shannon.
No.
Hi.
This is Gary.
Hi, Gary. I'm
How are
Shannon.
you? Very nice to meet you. You gonna make me good at this?
I'm gonna try my best. I'll let you watch me pack for a minute so you can get a basic idea of what we're doing. We're gonna scan this barcode here.
Yeah.
And it'll pop up in the box, and that's our tote number. What I do is I make my boxes from the top down.
Okay.
My product in.
How do you know which one to put in?
Because it's the one I scanned right here.
Got it. You are fast at this. You're so fast, it's incredible.
Our goal here is 90 an hour, one every 40 seconds.
How many did you do an hour?
I can do anywhere from 110 to 150 an hour. You think you're ready to go try this?
I'm a little nervous about moving at your speed, but I'm gonna pick up momentum very fast here, I'm sure of it.
You're fine. Go ahead and scan it.
You had this down way better than I did.
Okay.
And then put this guy in here.
Uh-huh.
I mean, what's going on with all these football products here? Are you a football fan?
I'm
No.
more so now than what I was because both of my sons play football now.
What pace am I going at right now? Fast enough pace?
No. It's all about getting a little rhythm is all it is.
You like it here?
Yeah, I love it here. It's a really good company to work for. I am fortunate enough that I'm trained in many areas, so I'm not stuck doing one thing every day, all day. Oh, nope. See, like this one's an AF. It's not an EED anymore.
Hey, Gary, right now you're sitting about 40 for this hour. Don't panic yet. But we do need to make sure we're heading towards the 90 and improving each hour.
Okay. Thank you.
You think you're ready to go back and try this again?
I think I am. If you're not at 90 units per hour, what happens?
It depends. Some people that they don't see any kind of potential in, they will lose their job.
Well, I can tell you I'm packing as fast as I can pack, so. A little bit nervous trying to keep up.
I bet you can go faster.
Uh-oh.
Gary, you doing okay?
I think I might have a problem.
Deep breath, take your time.
Uh-oh. Am I doing better?
Greg should be around in the next little bit and let us know how you're doing, so.
Hi.
Hey, Gary. A couple things here. This one here, we've got the label on the bottom of the box. It's obviously something cannot happen. This one here,
Sorry.
the label going over the edge like that's never going to read. It's going to kick off down the reject line, down at the other end. That's something that cannot happen as well. Between the issues with the boxes and your numbers, we no longer need your services.
Nothing I can do.
No.
Sorry.
All right. So let me fill you in on what happened there. This is from the TV show Undercover Boss, and that was Mike Rubin. He's the founder and CEO of GSI Commerce. And there we go. We'll just get off of it. Like I said, he's the CEO, and he goes down to the factory floor, and he fails. And he gets fired because he can't pack boxes fast enough. I mean, that's we got interrupted with the little update thing, but if you can read these on the screen, I clipped. This is off YouTube, and I watched the whole thing. And let me say that he went back to his board and said, "Boy, these people really worked their butts off," and all that good stuff. He gave them a good report, but one of the top comments is the irony that the boss went undercover to see if there was a way to increase production, but he wasn't even able to keep up with the current standard he set. And that was the whole purpose of that video. And he failed. And some of the comments are good. They're favorable towards him. Like, that's not his job. That's why he's paying his employee. That's what he's paying his employees to do. But some of them, does this thing have a pointer? Where is it? Kind of think a boss should be able to do kind of what the employees do. And another one says, the blind cannot lead the blind. So we have people who think that he shouldn't be CEO because he can't do that. And that's part of the problem with our thinking and the incorrect parts of our thinking that I want to correct today. And I want us to get away from the vertical and start thinking more about the horizontal ways of thinking. We need to break this paradigm. The typical vertical way of thinking usually puts the smartest folks on top, right? Well, who makes the list? Well, the smartest folks. So they put themselves on top. Well, I want us to stop thinking about the smartest and the low intelligence. Now, of course, we know from Scripture that there will be people who will have difficulty functioning because of their intelligence. And, Jesus kind of describes that the poor will always be with you. And we know as Christians, it's our job to look out for those weakest members. And I don't want to get into that. But I have another one over here where they put the highest IQ, but I want to look at the labels real quick, like highly gifted, borderline, mentally deficient, not intelligent at all, to smart, very smart, genius, super genius. And we put labels on them. Well, I'm here to tell you that Michael Rubin was not a genius on the factory floor. He had very low intelligence if we use this standard, right? And that doesn't make sense to any of us. So instead, we need to think of intelligence as a playing field. And everybody has different smarts. That woman was super smart at how to pack boxes and had refined her skills. Mozart was super smart at writing symphonies, but couldn't manage his wallet. So let's also get away from thinking because somebody is smart in one area, they're not smart in another area, that they're not smart at all. So this is the first thing I want to change. And I think when you look at this slide, you can already, through your own experience, begin to know what positions these are. And that's the way we like to do things. We like to arrange things. When you come into a room, let's say a classroom, you immediately, without thinking, know where the speaker's going to be and probably where you want to sit. So sometimes we reduce our thinking by building categories and things like that. So, but like I was saying, can you identify who's on offense and who's on defense? Just by looking at it. And we also know this is a very specialist position that not everybody can play. This requires some critical thinking. And today, no one likes to admit that they don't use critical thinking when making important decisions. It's like admitting you're not smart. However, critical thinking has nothing to do with being smart. It is not about intelligence. No one should consider themselves stupid as long as they're willing to ask questions and learn more. Critical thinking is about problem solving. It's about understanding, back it up one, it's about understanding the field and knowing where things go and then trying to figure out solutions. So, take chess for example. Do you really think a smart person who never played the game can sit down and beat a chess master? The very first time they sit at the chessboard? Of course not. So why do you think you can just jump into a business and expect to succeed? And these are some of the gaps in our thinking. How can you expect to be successful in an environment of business masters? So, just because you're super smart and highly intelligent, well, these are maybe predictors of success, but not guarantees. We hear that in all the financial investing commercials, don't we? So do you think you'll be successful at a game as complicated as chess? And in business, of course, is much more complicated than chess. So we're going to enter into our first practical exercise. So let's take a moment to look at what I've said so far, what has been said. Take 5 minutes at your table to discuss how critical thinking was used in the examples of kicking a soccer ball and the game of chess, and how might these examples be compared to starting and operating a business? What do you need to know going in? And here's some questions here to help you guide your discussion and align your thinking. And if you can come up with a scripture, that would be great.
John, would you mind reading Luke 14:28 to 34?
I don't have it pulled up on my notes. I was hoping one of you can.
And the gist of it is, though, do you remember what the gist of it is?
Here, Greta's going to read it for us.
Okay.
For which of you, in intending to build a tower, does not sit down first and count the cost, whether he has enough to finish it? Lest after he has laid the foundation and is not able to finish, all who see it begin to mock him, saying, this man began to build and was not able to finish.
Count the cost. All right, begin. Who wants to speak first? What table are we going to go with? Anybody? Okay, I was listening. I thought this one might be good. We'll put you on the spot. We have a camera right here, and summarize what your table discussed. Are you?
I'll take care of that.
Okay.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Go ahead.
What am I summarizing?
You're summarizing what you guys had a conversation here. What can you pull all together?
Welcome to the fire pit. Okay. So what we summarized was that certainly the leader of the organization needs to understand certain critical roles. And I like the one thing I heard, which was you hire for attitude, but you train for skill. And that whether you're surrounding yourself with, of course you don't want to surround yourself with dumb people, right? No offense to those with, but you want to hire people who are skilled at the areas that you're hiring them to perform. And if it's an area where you also have to know it, then you learn it as well, so you have a functional capability. But at the end of the day, you can't know everything, you can't do everything, so you're hiring people who are skilled at what they have to do so that they can function as a part of the team. Final comment was, like the organs of the body, the heart doesn't try to be the brain, doesn't try to be the liver, doesn't try to be the lungs, right? All of them keep us alive, but everyone does its own job.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. Next over here.
Yeah, let's do one more.
All right. Or do you want to go in the back table?
Or does anybody?
You guys want to do something? You want? Jack? All right. Stand up, young man, and present yourself.
So this just kind of follows along with some of that, but the story that I had for that then applies to what Jesus or what Paul talks about is the body has many members. There's not one that's more important than the other. So hands and eyes and feet and things like that. But I'm a physician, and I remember the first time I ran a code. And so a code is the patient has died right in front of you, and so you have to revive them. And so I had studied the protocols, I had trained on the protocols, and the doctor is in charge. So I'm at the head of the bed. This guy, it's the very first code I've ever run. I'm in the ICU. This guy has died in front of us, and so we're doing the protocols to revive him. And all these other nurses are around doing different parts, and I could not remember the protocol. In the moment, I couldn't remember it. And so I'm standing there, and one of the nurses says, "Give more epi." And I go, "Yeah, give more epi." And then another one says, "Shock him again at 300." "Yeah, shock him at 300. And we ended up reviving him. And the charge nurse, the head nurse for the whole ICU, came up to me afterwards, and she said, "I love running a code with you because it was so great having you at the head of the bed, because we were freaking out. And we looked up at the head of the bed, and there you were, so calm and collected. And it calmed us down, and we could perform. And so that's the team, the team. Everybody excellent at what they do. I wasn't excellent at what they do, obviously. But the whole team performed very effectively and got the outcome that we wanted. And so I think that illustrates the body and the different parts of the body coming together to give an outcome.
All right. Those are great examples, and you got out of the information what I was hoping about the different parts of the body. So I consider this a successful conclusion. But it also shows how much the body, or how much the Bible has influenced your minds and your thinking. So there's another great illustrative point out of that. But now, so just some quick questions just to answer these real quickly that I had up here. Are chess masters or soccer players simply born? No. Not really. You might have an inherent talent, but you really have to identify that talent and sharpen it. Can you walk onto a soccer pitch and start coaching or playing soccer without knowing the rules and all that? Right. Does any of this mean you were born unlucky because you can't be a chess master or soccer player? So, and of course we see in Luke, we got to count the cost of what goes into this. And this is why critical thinking is so important. For every move, there is a reaction that will affect the move, and the next move, and so on, in soccer, in chess. And we talk about thinking about the long game and things like that. Critical thinking, though, is a tool. It is not the only thinking tool, though. And we're going to discuss the other tools, but I wanted to jump out onto critical thinking first because that's our next discussion here. And we're going to talk about the three other tools. We'll hit two of them today if I stay on time. But before we dig deep into critical thinking, it'll help to understand the playing field and other aspects of thinking. There are three cognitive aspects that I've listed up here. My work is based on Dr. Stuart Cook, who was a missionary to South Africa, the late Stuart Cook. He was killed in a car wreck here in America. But I like his attitude. He goes, I know this flies in the face of conventional thinking, and I'll be criticized for it, but I'm too old to really care about that. And I agree with his sentiment. If we're going to speak truth to power, we're going to take flack for it. But for the purpose of this discussion, I will be calling these Aspect A, Aspect B, and Aspect C ways of thinking. This is a brief discussion. I could lecture on this all day, but I'm just going to give you the overview of how this thinking works. So Aspect A, this is your abstract, conceptual, critical thinking. And it involves concepts, abstract thoughts, analysis. This includes and is not limited to analyzing, reasoning, evaluating, problem solving, and decision making. In the West, this is the typical standard of thinking. However, other cultures might have different standards. This and that I will discuss at the end. So keep that in mind. This aspect of thought focuses on our thinking and is more about reflection, introspective, mentally calculating to where an idea is leading. So let's define some terms. What is a concept? It's literally an abstraction. A concept can be in words. Words, This is one of my favorite ones, and learned graduate school. Wow. Words don't tell you what something is. You say, well, of course it does. That tells me, when I say table, I know what that is. What does the word table tell you about anything? Nothing. It tells you what it isn't. It tells you when you say table, you're saying, well, it's not a chair, it's not a door, it's not the floor, it's not the walls, it's not a ceiling, it's not a person or an animal. So words signify what something is not. I think this was illustrated in the book Lord of the Rings. And because this was the conversation going on in the 1930s and 40s through the 60s. And I think Tolkien reflected it when the tree ants, if you've read the book, you know who the tree ants are and who the hobbits are. The tree ants goes, well, you're certainly not orcs. And he goes, yeah, or you're certainly not bow-legged bandy, and describe this term that would describe an orc. And they go, what's your word for it? And they go, orcs. And he goes, whoa, such a hasty word. And he goes, wow, what do you call them? Bow-legged, hairy, long-armed, fanged, hates life, slashes things, kills things. And so their word was descriptive. And of course they look at it and he goes, man, it must take forever to say good morning in your language. So, words don't tell you what that, but moving on, numbers, pictures. We always say a picture's worth 1,000 words. So these illustrate concepts. What does abstraction mean? Well, it comes from the Latin word abstractus, literally to draw away or draw off. Abstract conceptual thinkers take various unseemingly unrelated items that are out here in the world or even in the mind and find out what parts of their being might be relative to each other. Some people make a living at this. Concepts only live in one place, so they only live in our minds. And they are not out in the world waiting to be discovered. Now, by me just saying they live only in our minds runs against materialist determinism, which underpins critical race theory. Because materialist deterministic scientists say, you don't think with your mind, you think with your brain. Because to say that there's a mind is to admit that there is something outside of the material world. So anyway, that's why these are important words of what we're describing. So critical thinking uses concepts or ideas in an intellectually disciplined process of actively and skillfully conceptualizing. I've got it written up here. Skillfully conceptualizing, applying, analyzing, synthesizing, and evaluating disparate and or relative information gathered from the material world, observation, experience, reflection, reasoning, studying, understanding concepts in books necessitates the use of abstract critical thinking. And I hope in your minds right now, you just kind of went, in the beginning was the Word. Because that's real important to what we're talking about. So just to give you a quick demonstration, house cat. House cat is a set of words that helps take a concept and make it something concrete. So when I say house cat, yes, that's my son's Siamese cat. And I just ran out there and snapped a picture of him, or her. Furry, 4 legs, claws. I'm sure there's other things you can think of about cats. Cats. Now, we can abstract from this going up. Cats is a species. It's a mammal. It's in the animal kingdom. And then we can abstract and go down with our concepts. It's made up of flesh. The flesh is made up of cells. The cells are made up of proteins. Proteins are made up of molecules all the way down to atoms. And it is from these concepts that systems are built. Often it is taking immaterial thoughts and making them into material things. Which leads us to practical exercise number 2. To help us understand this, let's look at the Bible and what it says. And everybody, I hope, in here can quote John 1 and Genesis 1. So, discuss how these two concepts are linked, how they're alike, but how are they different? I'll give you 4 minutes this time so I can keep us on track. In the beginning was the Word. All right, Eric. You ready? You want to start? Let's start at your table. They didn't get to speak last time. So
you want this group to talk?
Yeah, I want that group to talk.
Well, since I've got the mic, I have the power to choose. You have been chosen to speak into that little black thing right there and describe the horror of our group here. No.
What am I speaking about? Where are we? John 1 comes before Genesis 1 because it says, in the beginning was the Word, that point of singularity for cosmologists before the Big Bang even occurred. And then Genesis comes along and says, yes, the Word was God. In the beginning, God made the heavens and earth. He created in a sequence that He chose to prepare the earth for His highest creation, the crown of creation called man, made in His image. So we're made like God for a reason that we discover through critical thinking.
Thank you. Excellent.
Anyone else?
I love how you get nominated by those who really would like to speak but don't want to. But to me, this some of the thoughts that I had was that God was and God is. And He is in charge. He created everything. He is here today. And He is in charge. And we are to follow His directing. And if we don't, we pay the price. But God is, God was, and we're to obey.
And He will be.
So, oh, you got one? Okay.
So I'll just add one thing about logos and critical thinking. So logos, so in the beginning, the first thing God did is He spoke. He said, let there be light. There was light. And so the word, the idea, the thing that was inside of God was real. It became real, and He saw that it was good. And that is described in John as logos. And the concept of logos in Greek thought and Babylonian thought before that is that the thought inside of you, the idea inside of you, and the reality are the same thing. They're not broken. And so for critical thinking, if your brain is disconnected, that's why we can have science. If your brain, if what you think about in your mind in the abstract world has no relation to reality at all, then you can't do anything. You can't have science. You can't work on anything. You can't create anything new. But if the ideas inside of you and the reality that's outside of you are the same, and to the degree that they're the same, then you can have critical thinking that applies to the real world.
And the Word became flesh. And that's what liberated Western thinking from the rest of the world. They argued for 6 centuries, what is the nature and person of Christ? And what they came down to is it all begins with the person. Jesus wasn't a demigod in the Greek sense or any of the pagan senses. So Moving on. Just real quickly, we're going to run through these. Some of the advantages of abstract thinking: rational and logical, experts in research, synthesizing different concepts, evaluating information. Questions like who published this? And as we know with the news media today, instead of having a news media that publishes for the whole family, everybody decided to stake their money on preaching to certain camps. And so that's what we see in our news media today, that it's divided up into different camps and different audiences and wants to make money from them instead of presenting something for everybody. So do they represent themselves or do they represent someone else when they're speaking? Abstract disadvantages. Well, you get lost in the details and analysis. And I like what Albert Einstein said about this. He wasn't always efficient with his resources. He says, I have 1 hour to solve a problem. I spend 55 minutes thinking about it, and I spend 5 minutes thinking about solutions. So the other interesting thing, I like what Thomas Sowell said about solutions. He goes, there's no such thing. There's only compromises. Because we can't think out like God can think out all the consequences. So I'll give you a quick example. We solved the problem of world hunger. The only people who are starving are those who are, their access to food is restricted because of politics. Because we grow enough to feed everybody. Now we have an obesity and diabetes problem. So, in the wealthier countries. And it's spreading to the other countries as well. So, other problems is this can be time consuming, and as we saw in the video, repetitive tasks can become difficult. Because I know if I was there, I'm too busy thinking about how can I do this better? How can I streamline this? Is there a better way to do this? Why are we doing it this way? Instead of thinking about the task at hand. So, a quick summary. People who are suitable at the workplace, in the work field. Middle managers to C-suite. Professions like lawyers, teachers, professors, especially researchers, criminal investigators, investment strategists, entrepreneurs. Mostly use ideas and concepts and bring them to life. I mean, we didn't know we needed these 30 years ago. So this is rockets, missiles, hygiene items. I would argue that plumbers have saved more lives than doctors. So frequency hop, that's another one. This wouldn't be possible without things like frequency hop. So, not to belabor this too much, let's get to concrete thinking really quickly here. This thinking focuses on the tangible world and uses memory and experience in that world. All our experiences proceed through aspect B. And everything except our internal reflections. It covers all sensory information and includes our attention to details. So let me explain a real quick attention to detail. This is one Dr. Stuart Cook liked to talk about. In South Africa, where he worked, he said there was a chicken thief. And this farmer wound up with 3 chickens missing. And he went to the police and he said, I'm missing 3 chickens. And your patrols, will you be on the lookout for 3 white leghorn chickens? Yeah. Sure enough, a couple of days later, they find the feet and heads of a leghorn chicken. 3 of them. 3 heads, 6 pairs of feet in the trash. So they go to the local butcher, they collect some more leghorn chicken heads, and they take these heads and they lay them out, about 20 of them, and they ask the farmer, "Can you identify your chickens?" And the farmer walked up and he studied them for a minute, and he goes, "This one, and this one." And they go, "You're correct. Those are your 3 chickens." And they went and made an arrest. That's serious, concrete thinking, attention to details. Where we in the West, we generalize and conceptualize and look for where things are related. The South African's looking at what makes this different from all the others, and he could identify those. And there's lots of stories about that, but that's just one. So, ever familiar with this saying right here, this old English saying, "Can't see the forest for the trees"? That's kind of where that African farmer's at in his thinking. What does this bring to your mind? Just reflect on that while I talk. Other examples are, he's worried about a few broken doorknobs, and we're trying to fix the whole house. Are there people at your work that are like that? And you're like going, "Come on. Why are you worried about this? We got bigger problems." So, this is one of the first things I ran into in Iraq, as most countries like to pronounce it. That's Iraq for you in Middle Tennessee, and on the internet out there. You would say something to an Iraqi that we consider, it's just plain common sense. Time is money. And they would smile and they'd shake their head. But inside they're going, "I've talked to them about this, so I know." And they go, "No, what is time and money? They're 2 different things." And so I have to explain. Well, think of it like this. You might be paid by the hour or by the contract. The longer or more time it takes, the more it's going to cost. Or it might be written into your contract, if you come in under time and finish early, you get a bonus. And that's how we link time and money. But really, and you see these are Kenya shillings, because I teach this in Kenya. I want something to draw on. This is an abstract concept in and of itself. This represents hours worked, values, and other things that we use to exchange. Because we found it easier to abstract with it. Not gold. That's a little more concrete. This is completely fiat. What's it tied to? It's tied to faith that the government says it's going to work. So, the McGraw-Hill Concise Dictionary of Modern Medicine defines concrete thinking as cognition that reflects experience rather than abstraction, typical of those who are unable to generalize. Let that sink in for a minute. Unable to generalize. So, some of the advantages and disadvantages. Watch my time here. Got a couple of minutes, and then I think we'll wrap up. And I'll give a discussion question for y'all next Friday, because we can't meet here. This place is closed at Panera Bread, and then we'll come back the week after that, 2 weeks from today, and I'll wrap this up. So, as I was saying, time is money. And this is literally what I've demonstrated is how time can become money. Because it also takes these concepts and makes them things. But the problem with some of these idioms and metaphors is they can bring confusion. And I've learned when talking to Kenyans or Iraqis, I don't say, well, it's as easy as cake. They're like, I don't see a cake. And so I just simply say, don't tell them it's a piece of cake when there's no dessert in sight. Just simply say, this is going to be an easy task for you. Oh, okay. I also want to add, children are very concrete thinkers and think very black and white. And it's not until they start beginning, maybe as early as 9, that they can start thinking abstractly. So, but some of the advantages is efficiency, repetitive skills, as we saw the woman in the video. They can work independently. There's nobody supervising her. She just gets it done. Meetings frustrate them. Why are we talking? Why aren't we doing? They execute and follow instructions well. They focus very well. They don't let distractions get in their way. Hey, that floor manager, he's like, hey, you're not meeting the mission. We're gonna move on to someone else. Goodbye. He has a very practical approach to work. Some of the disadvantages, they can become dogmatic and flexible. You know who they are. You've met them at the Department of Motor Vehicles. Everybody's laughing because it's true. You've met them. You've met these people. You go, I have a unique situation. And they say, no. And then you say, may I speak to a manager, please? Very nicely. Because they don't see the abstraction. They don't see it. It's like, I like what one of my colonels said. He goes, we just put that in the too hard box. You get people who just put things in the too hard box and ignore them. So they can't see a need for change. They get lost in the details and miss the big concepts. They may need help grasping a solution that can broadly apply to similar systems. Now, as long as they're willing to learn, they're not stupid. All right. You've got to have a willingness to learn. But at the same time, like we saw with the floor manager, they can seem unfeeling and unwilling to understand the emotions and feelings of others. You're fired. So, here are some work areas where concrete thinkers can excel. We've got insurance claims, stock taking, masonry, construction work, bank teller. I have my son was in Scouts with a young man who had 2 brothers that in high school were considered special needs. And when they graduated high school, the older brother said, let me help you find a job. And one of them came to work with him in a restaurant. He felt lost at the restaurant. I don't have anything to contribute here. Took him to Tensco, a factory, plugged him into work there through a temporary agency. Now Tensco's hired him on full time. This young man's buying a truck. This special needs guy. He flourishes because he knows what time he's got to be there. He knows exactly what he's got to do while he's there. He knows when he gets his breaks, when he eats lunch, and when he's going home, and how much he gets paid for all his trouble. And he's now buying a brand new Ford F-150. And is managing well. He's excelling. The other brother, well, he didn't like the restaurant business either, but he certainly didn't like the factory. He works in a cafeteria for the elementary school system because he gets to do different things there. But the hours are shorter. He only has to work 5 hours a day. But at the same time, he comes in, he knows where to get started, he knows when he's going to leave, and he's excited if they go, hey, we've got a problem, can you jump in over here and help out? He gets more variety out of that, and he really likes that. So it's trying to find people to plug them in as managers and leaders where they're going to fit and flourish. And so I'm going to park that right there. Jesus, I'm going to leave you hanging with this, and I'll send this out by email, and you'll get a handout for this at the next meeting. Jesus had a method of teaching using concepts, and these were more effective than being specific. Jesus used concepts to portray what the kingdom was going to look like, what the fulfillment of the Old Testament was looking like. Remember, he always says, the kingdom of God is like this. So we'll end there. And I've asked Bruce to come up and close us out with prayer ahead of time. So I'll let you close us out.
Thank you, John Roy. Appreciate it. Let's give him a quick hand there. Yeah. So